Do you need cash? Do you want to consolidate debt? Premier Credit can help. They provide quick and confidential loans for any reason. Their service is same day and most loans are approved within minutes. You can apply in person or by the phone. Their experienced and knowledgeable loan professionals will leave you feeling confident that your loan is being properly handled in a secure manner. Premier Credit can be reached at 225-667-8100, or you can email WeSayYes@premiercredit.com, or stop by and spin the wheel at 139 Del Norte Avenue in Denham Springs. They're open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and are a proud sponsor of Local Leaders, the podcast.
Hi, it's Tricia Johnston, residential realtor with Blum with your real estate tip of the week. I get a lot of calls from homeowners asking should we questions. Should we refinance? Should we put in a pool? Should we add a bonus from above the garage? The answer is never just as easy as yes or no. It always turns into a conversation that starts with my question, how long are you planning to live in the house? If they're planning to sell in the next year or so, then it may not be a smart financial decision for them to refinance or add a pool or bonus room. But if they're planning to live in the house another 5, 7, or 10 years, it might be the right decision for their family. We weigh the pros and cons together to help them figure out if it's the right decision for them. If I can help answer any questions that you have about real estate, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. I'm Tricia Johnston with Blum, and I'll be back here again next week with another real estate tip for you.
When it comes to insurance, Louisiana is known for its high car insurance rates, its higher than usual percentage of drivers that are uninsured, and due to its proximity to the Gulf of Mexico, the high number of storm-related claims. My guest today is a local Livingston Parish business whose primary goal it is to give you the most bang for your buck. So when it comes to your insurance needs, we're going to discuss all about them today with our guest, William Waldrep of TWFG Insurance. So with that, welcome William to Local Leaders, the podcast.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me today. I'm glad to be here, man.
Awesome. We're glad to have you here. You have owned businesses in Denham Springs area for a long time, Livingston Parish area. Before we get into all of that, I do want to, for the viewers out there, they may notice they don't see me right now. They only hear me. We're trying a little bit different camera angle today, kind of playing around with some things. So I'm here. And you're going to hear all about me, but you won't see me. As a matter of fact, William, you are so important that I didn't even want to share the screen with you.
Well, that's good to know. Oh, God, I'm going to tear this table up. Yeah, I know. It's probably it's a little nerve-wracking that you got just me on there, but I guess, first go at this, but we'll get after it. It's good.
Yeah, the viewers will appreciate that I'm not throwing a glare on the screen for once, so that's a good thing with my bald head. So first, I want to get into your background a little bit before we do kind of get into insurance and talk about where you're from, where you attended high school, and where you went to college.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So I'm not originally from here. I was born in Hammond, so don't hold that against me.
Tangy.
Yeah. So and the reason why is my dad was working at First Guaranty Bank in Hammond when he moved here. We moved here in 82 or no, 83. I'm sorry. It's been that long.
Yeah.
He moved here because he got a position at First National Bank. And so we moved out here. And of course, this is where he was from to begin with. So my grandfather started his dental practice here in Denham Springs, and that was the early 50s. So this was like post World War II, after he got out of the service and went to dental school. and decided they opened their practice here. So, and I think at that time he was one of maybe 2 dentists that were here in in Denham Springs.
My, how times have changed.
So now they're everywhere. But so that's why we are we're attached to Denham Springs. Even though I was born in Hammond, lived the first few years of my life in Hammond, moved to Denham, and I've I went to Denham High.
Denham High, go Jackets!
And graduated in 1998, and I've. Let's see, where was I? Oh, train of thought. Anyway, college, Southeastern. So I went to Southeastern, studied business, and got out of that. And now I've just been I've been on different paths, I guess, so to speak, as far as business goes.
But you've done business, when you got out of college, what I find interesting about you is you've owned several different businesses, which is really nice. I would imagine you've learned lessons along the way from each of those businesses, and then the good things that you learned, you probably took along with you in your business that you have now. I do want to talk about those a little bit. So when you got out of college, did you work for somebody else, or did you automatically go into entrepreneurship?
Well, that's kind of between, so I started at Southeastern in the fall of 98. So I graduated in 98, started Southeastern fall of 98. I intended to be a nurse, oddly enough, when I went to Southeastern. But I found that path was just not the path for me. And then so I was doing a few things, and really what got me interested in more the sales industry, and I guess it's because I like to talk to people, is while I was working in college, I was working at a store called The Buckle. I remember The Buckle. I had worked retail, or I'd worked at the car wash, which was Plantation Car Wash. Now it's, I think, Ollie's. But so I'd always worked kind of like an hourly type job, and then I went to the Buckle, and Buckle was an hourly job. Sorry, God, I can't spit that out. Plus commission. So when I started, it was right before Christmas. So I was actually working Black Friday, and when I sold more clothes than I could imagine. And then when I got my check, it was almost triple because of the amount of commission I made.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I can make real money selling stuff. So, and that kind of stayed in my head. So after that, I was like, I left the Buckle. I ended up working at Innovative Audio selling, and that was pretty much a same type scenario, whereas, paid, like a salary plus commission type deal. And I really enjoyed it. So as I kind of grew into what I wanted to do, there's got to be other things out there to sell, or there's, and that's kind of when I got on my path to that, I started in the car business. Got into the used car business probably early 2000. And then did that until about 2003, 2004. Now,
was this your own lot?
Yes. So I started with a guy in Baton Rouge who did the same thing. And kind of got my feet wet on how that was to go. And then the original plan was to him open a second lot, and I would be the one that was running that second lot because me and my father at that time were his business partner. So that worked out well for a while, and when we ended up parting ways and dissolving that partnership. So just me and my dad were running the lot, and I got to where that was a more than a 9-to-5 type scenario. That was up at 7, not done till probably 7. So I'm like 12-hour days working on Saturday. Was missing out on LSU games because I was the only one working the lot. Yeah. And then it got to where the used car business was a weird business. There's a lot of money to be made in it. But it was just it wasn't for me. And I think the death knell, for that is when I got into the rent to own scenario with used cars. And that became probably the thing that drove me away from the business because, when you're renting used cars, it was just, it's frustrating. It was a frustrating business. And I was tired of doing it. And I got to talking to a friend of mine who was a real estate agent at the time. And she was a longtime real estate agent. She's like, look, why don't you get into why don't you get into selling houses? She said, you've been.
BJ Pawn and Gun has been servicing the Livingston Parish community since 1990. If you need it, there's a good chance BJ Pawn has it. So go see them in Denham Springs. They're a proud sponsor of Local Leaders, the podcast.
You've lived in Denham Springs all your life, that would help you. So about 2003, I went and took the class to go get licensed to sell real estate, and started selling real estate for Covington. It wasn't Covington and Associates, but that's what it is now. Lawson Covington. I think it was Coldwell Banker is who they were associated with then. So got into the real estate business, and that was, so that's pre-Katrina. So it was normalized. And then, right as Katrina hit, we had all that influx of people moving up from New Orleans. Business was good for a while. And then 2007 hit. And when the financial crisis hit, people stopped buying houses.
Absolutely.
Because nobody could afford it. Nobody would lend them money.
Weren't, that was the big problem.
So and I probably could have foreseen this coming. Because, people were getting 105% of their loan to value on stuff like that. So they were borrowing more money than the house was worth. But, times were good for a point. And at this point in time, I had left college, was selling. I was making enough money. Didn't think I was going to need college, honestly. And then 2007 hit. I go from, a pretty hefty, commission to 2007, 2008 was just dismal. Because you just couldn't give property away at that point. Yeah. So me and my wife, I decided it was time to go back to college, finish out my degree, and go do something. And so that was about 2000. Oh, it must have been into 2006, because you could see the slowdown coming. Yeah. Because Katrina had stopped. This other, the looming disaster that happened in 2007-8 was there. So I was like, you know what? While I've got the money, let me go back to school. And so I went back to school. And then by 2008, I graduated and finished out and started looking for a position. Now,
so you were on the 10-year plan.
Yeah, I was on a 10-year plan, and I was not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Right. I was just, I went for a few years, and it was really after 2001 is when I stopped going. Yeah. So I'd had 3 years in already. Went back about the end of 2006. Took me another 2.5 years to get back out.
Well, very good, though. You were married at that point, and still went back and got your degree.
And at that point, let's see, by the time I went back, I was on child 3. So yeah, I had 3 children at the time.
Wow.
So, and my wife worked a full-time job, and she worked for a company that was doing all the disaster cleanup after Katrina and Gustav and Rita and all the big name storms that came there and just wrecked the South, during that time period. So yeah, after I got out, I have a friend of mine that, I was trying to figure out what am I going to do, with my life. I like selling stuff. I like talking to people. I like, being with, around people. I think that's one of those things. I'm not a hermit.
Right.
So I said, what am I going to do? So I got to, they gave me it's one of these tests that kind of tells you what you're good at. And the 2 things that came up the most every time I took it, those last few years was public relations and insurance, which are 2 totally different, just randomized, just they didn't make sense. It'd be, so I got to looking at public relations, and I'm like, man, do I want to be a PR person in Louisiana? I said, that might be, who is my clientele going to be in Louisiana?
Yeah, we're not in New York or California.
So I'm looking around at making a real decision. At PR, I could follow a PR career, and who's my clientele? And then I got to thinking, God, I'm in Louisiana. It's going to be nothing but politicians. Yeah. I said that, and I hate politicians. Yeah. I don't like them. And that's the thing is I had to make a decision. I'm like, so I got to looking at insurance, and I was like, well, the other thing it says I'm good at is insurance, which I didn't know anything about the insurance business except I had to pay it at that point in time. You had to have car insurance, you had to have home insurance. The only interactions I ever had were, whoever I happened to be insured with at that time. So I went and talked to a lady that's got a State Farm agency here.
Yeah.
And
Never heard of them.
yeah. And I asked her, I was like, listen, I said, because she had known my family for a very long time. I was like, I'm thinking about getting into the insurance business. She's like, well, you'd be good at it. I'm like, really? She said, yeah. She said, it has a lot to do with staying here, staying in town. Your name is going to help you because you've been part of you're not only has your grandfather been, a dentist or, had practiced dentistry here for a long, long time. I mean, it's going to go a long way, but.
And your dad was at the bank.
And so she said that would probably be a good idea. Why don't you pursue that? So I went and took the classes. And in 2009, I got licensed. And at that point, I was searching for, a place to go.
Yeah.
So I went and looked. I started with State Farm originally.
Yeah.
So it was another lady in Baton Rouge, and I was kind of at the point where like I went for, I was there for a few weeks, and it was like, watch this training video, watch this training video, watch this training video. I'm like, golly, and I finally just like, listen, what else can I do? I mean, because I'm like, I've never sold insurance. I need somebody to tell me what it is I need to do and just tell me how to sell it, and I'll go sell it to somebody.
Yeah.
And just like, it just wasn't, I don't think she was willing. She was an older lady. I think she's retired now. And she wasn't willing to train somebody at that point, like to do that portion or what I was looking for. So I left. I told her, I was like, look, I don't know if this is going to work between us. I don't feel that. I mean, I said, I can't sit here and watch training videos all day long and expect to, I said, this is killing me.
Yeah.
I said, I don't like being locked in a room. And so I went, I parted ways with her, started looking around, found an agency in Hammond. This guy had multiple agencies throughout Louisiana, and went to work for him. And this is 2010. So yeah, my brain's old. So
yeah, I understand.
So 2010, go work for him. And it's a company called Speed Steel Insurance, or it's now, I think it's just Steel Insurance at this point. But he's got, several agencies around the kind of like Franklinton, Hammond, New Orleans, got one in Lafayette. Got to, spend a year there working for that guy, and really kind of learn not so much what I was wanting to learn, but enough to be dangerous at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I would hang around the CSRs, because he had multiple CSRs doing, he had separate CSRs that did commercial work, and he had separate CSRs that do personal lines work. And so I would just basically sit down, and these ladies had been in the business for a long time. So for that year, I spent a year picking their brain, and I was selling some stuff, and I kind of got the gist of it, because back then it was just like, go get your customer to fill out this application, hand it to the CSR, she goes from there. I'm like, well, that didn't tell me anything. I mean, basically, I'm an information collector. I don't want to just collect information. I mean, great, I'm getting paid, but I said I want to learn the ins and outs of the business. And it's oddly one morning, I was going to James Drugs to get breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon.
Oh yeah, it's good over there.
So, and I ran into an old family friend of mine and my father's. They owned an agency here in Denham Springs, and it's an old agency. It was a Klondike agency. So Klondike is probably one of the oldest family businesses outside, I think, the paper here.
Really?
Yeah. They were 90. God, they're over 90 years old.
Wow.
And so he asked me, he's like, hey, listen, I got a position as a producer. If you're not happy in Hammond and, you want to come out here and do the deal, come on. And I did. So I took him up on his offer. And for 3 years, I spent time there. And what I gained from there was more knowledge on how to actually run an agency, which has kind of helped. So at this point in time, I've kind of picked up at different agencies that I've been at. I've kind of picked up just different ways of how to do things in different areas and aspects of how to run the agency. So, now I was an information collector before. Now I'm kind of running the ins and outs of how the agency is supposed to run, how he did it. Now, granted, his methods are still a bit antiquated because he was using a typewriter.
Yeah.
And I was, I tried to introduce some things here and there, and but at a point in time where I was like, I'm still missing something else. There's that sales. How do you drive sales? Because he was more in like managing the customer role at that point because he was towards retirement, and so I was like, how do you drum up new business? Because I mean, I've tried many different ways to, how do I bring these people in? So it's just 2013. Still didn't see where he was going to retire. He still hasn't, by the way.
Yeah. Tiffany Sicard with HomeKey Mortgage combines the experience and knowledge you need to make your mortgage loan a smooth, stress-free process. Reach out to Tiffany for more information on the vast mortgage programs available in the Livingston Parish area. Tiffany Sicard of HomeKey Mortgage, a proud sponsor of Local Leaders, the podcast.
And I was like, and then I happened to get a call from Horace because I'd actually interviewed with Horace originally over at State Farm, Horace Wilkinson.
Oh yeah.
And he called me up. He's like, "Look, man, I've got a position open. Come interview for it." So I did. I met him for lunch. Interviewed. I accepted because he offered, and then really learned like how they kind of like it was more of their focus was the cold calling on that side of it now, and that's probably the reason why I'm not with State Farm anymore. But I don't per se like I didn't like the cold calling aspect of it, but the one thing that I did take out of that was I basically had a little baptism by fire when it came to B&I. He walked in my office one day and said, "Hey, I need you to go to my meeting for me, and you're just going to tell them what we do here."
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I go, and this is the first time I've ever been in B&I, and of course I'm sure I know I ticked somebody off because I stood up and said that we sold life insurance, and there was a life person in the boomers at that point in time, and that was but I mean, I got introduced to B&I, and I got introduced to the way that I really wanted to do business. And that was like referral type business where you're not having to like beg people on the phone, or you're not having, or they'll,
well, it's networking.
That was the real introduction to an actual networking and how to really conduct a small business and make a small business grow. Because being that I was basically going to his meetings for him, all the time, when I was working for him after that, they were just handing me referrals. I'm going, what are these? These are people that are not even in the group. You're handing me a referral for somebody else. And like, yeah, this is how it works. And I was really intrigued by that.
Yeah.
So almost a year after that, I had parted ways with State Farm. I just didn't like, because coming from an independent agency for 4 years before State Farm, you had multiple things to sell. So in that, I had, that opportunity to sell multiple people, multiple things. There at State Farm, I felt like I was pigeonholed into home auto and, life insurance. And it was just like, not what I wanted to do. That was just, I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot.
Sure.
But like I had this feeling inside of me, this is not where I need to be. So 2014, I left State Farm, opened my own agency, just Waldrep Insurance Group.
There you go.
So started with there.
Great name.
And so I started at that, and I realized how hard it was for an agent, especially a new agent, to get a contract with company to sell. Now, luckily, prior to that, I had some relationships with people in some of these brokerages where I was able to get a contract, because in my business, you just can't go open an agency and just start selling stuff. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
You have to have contracts with, your Progressives, your Safecos, your, MetLife, National General. I mean, I can go on and on and on with all the companies that we represent, but at that point in time, with no real book of business to show for it, most companies weren't willing to take a look at a new budding agency that had nothing. So I spent the next basically, almost 2 years just trying to figure out how to grow a business with nothing to sell.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening experience. But I got to where the one thing I did do was go search out another B&I group. And I found one, and this was somebody that that was working at 5 Star Printing at the time. I think one of his sales people. She was in a group that was called Prosperity Partners. And Prosperity Partners had their visitors day. And so I got in with Prosperity Partners, and I told them they already, at that point in time, they had a PNC agent in there. And I told them, I'd really love to be in here, but I don't really sell anything but commercial insurance right now, because that's all I was contracted with. I mean, I could sell Progressive Auto. I said, but my main focus right now is the commercial end of the insurance. So general liability, workers' compensation, things of that nature. And so they talked to the agent that was in there. She's like, look, I don't do that. All I do is home and auto. If you want to come in here and sell your commercial end of it, I'll refer you commercial business. Perfect. So I was able to break into the agency, break into B&I that way with my own agency. And I started to see some traction. The biggest problem was I was having a lot of people coming to me because, now I'd been in business for 2 years, names out there. I had people starting to come to me for home and auto. Well, I can't write it. So I'm sending it to this girl in B&I. So it was good. We had a good relationship at that point. But, towards the end of 2015, I'm looking at my bottom line like, man, look at what I've given this girl in home and auto business. Why? I mean, I really need to see if I can't recapture some of that. And how do I do that? Because right now I don't have a book to show for it. I mean, and nobody's going to believe me that I've given away this amount of business to somebody.
Right.
So, told you. So I got to look at, and she happened to work for TWFG Insurance. So I got her to tell me, I had a one-to-one with her. I was like, tell me about TWFG. And she went over the whole spiel about it. And I was like, man, that's really interesting. So I got to searching on TWFG's website. They had a program for agents that was called the Access program. So Access allows an independent agent like myself that was, struggling to get a contract, access to every one of their contracts that they had at a lessened rate. So it was like, 30% of the commission on. So like for every $100 in commission you make, $30 is what you're getting out of it. Better than nothing, right? Sure. So I called them up, and I got my agency rep on the phone. She is now Zori. She's like, listen, we don't have anybody in Denham Springs. She said the nearest TWFG agency is on Sherwood, she said, how far is that from Denham? I'm like, Sherwood Forest, I said, it's probably 5, 7. I said, probably 8 miles up the road, I would think. I mean, I'm just spitballing. I'm not sure exactly. I said, maybe a good 10 miles. I said, is that close enough? She said, no, that's fine. She said, we don't have anybody in your area. And oddly enough, she said, that's the only TWFG agency within about 45 miles from that point. So there was nobody. There was just that one agency on Sherwood. Right. So kind of at that point, she's like, fill out the application. Let me submit your book of business that you have right now, and we'll get back to you. I was like, okay. And she said, look, you're approved. Here's the franchise fee, which was very reasonable. Sure. And are you interested? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. She said, well, we want you to be a branch owner, and you'll have full access to everything, and you'll have full commissions. I was like, oh, so this is not the access. She's like, no, you're going to be a branch owner, and we're going to need you to come to the Woodlands and train for a week, and then we're going to turn you loose. I'm like, oh, okay. Awesome. So it worked out well. So that's why I'm here now. So 5 years later, still with TWFG.
Yeah. And so for those that may not be familiar, TWFG is actually a very large company. Yes. Where are they based out of?
They are based out of the Woodlands, Texas, which is a suburb north of Houston. So if you've ever driven through Houston, which is a nightmare, go north. Yeah, get stuck on that loop that goes around Houston, and make sure you get on the right one, because the past 2 times I've driven to the Woodlands, I've gotten on the tollway without thinking about it, and of course, I've gotten a nice ticket in the mail.
Oh,
so
yeah. I never have change for tolls. I'm like, they'll mail me something.
Right.
So they're in the Woodlands in Texas, and they're actually a broker of insurance. So you and I talked a little bit before the show that they do offer a few of their own products, but primarily what your job is. If a customer came to you and they said, I need picking insurance, car insurance, can you shop me some rates? You basically have the ability to go in there. You deal with many different insurance carriers, and you would shop those rates for them, find them the best rate, and then obviously get back with them on that and say, here's who can write you, and this is the amount per month or for the annual policy or whatever. I would imagine that's primarily an advantage to what you do, in my opinion, because what you're primarily doing is you're finding the best rate for that customer. Whereas if you go into an insurance company where they sell all their own products, they're not going to quote everybody else's rate to you, are they?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, and what those agencies are called, those are captives. So State Farm, Allstate, Farm Bureau, Shelter, they're all a captive agency. So a captive, in turn, sells their own product, and that's all they sell. Now, they do have some other ability to sell, and oddly enough, State Farm does write a product of the of TWFG's. We actually underwrite some of their commercial lines.
Gotcha.
Through Twico, which is another subsidiary of TWFG.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, most people don't know that, and that's not something you'd ever find out. But unless you got your form in the mail and you would see actually your State Farm policy that you bought, you'd see TWFG on it.
Yeah, so. And TWFG is one of the largest insurance companies in the United States, I would imagine.
TWFG started, and I'll just give you kind of a rough background on TWFG because I don't know if I've done that yet. Started in 2001. The guy that owns it, Gordy Bunch, he started TWFG with about $10,000 in raised capital.
Wow.
Today, I believe we're at $500 million in written premium, and we are the eighth largest privately owned insurance company. We are the largest in Texas, and we are the largest personal lines writer in Louisiana.
And that's something I didn't know till you just said it, and that is that you are privately owned.
Yes.
So love that. And to be that large and be privately owned is impressive.
Right.
Usually when you get to that size, you're looking for money for expansion, and you're wanting to go public for that reason. So to get that large, be privately owned, that's very impressive. And it speaks to who you not work for, but who you have a franchise with in TWFG. So you opened this business in Livingston Parish. Obviously, you have a history here, but I'm sure there was a time when you basically had to sit down and think, where do I want to open this business? Do I want to stay in Livingston Parish, or do I want to go to Ascension or Baton Rouge? Or I know they had a branch you mentioned in Baton Rouge, but certainly Ascension Parish was an option. Why Livingston Parish?
So, yeah, and let me back up on that because I did, like the branch that was on Sherwood, I ended up purchasing from the agent at that time. So this was post 2016 flood. I had just opened my branch. Of course, my branch flooded. And so I spent the next few months in his office. Well, the guy that owned that agency at the time, he was from Gretna, and it's kind of a long drive to come up to Baton Rouge from Gretna because that's like an hour and a half one way. Yeah. And we got to talking, and I finally convinced him to sell me his agency, basically.
Wow.
And so at that time,
you are a good salesman.
So at that time, I was looking at where do I stay? Do I stay in this office? Do I go back home, basically, to Denham? And it come to the point to where I was just more comfortable dealing with or being in Denham. I mean, that's where I'm from. I mean, I'm pretty much raised here. I went to school here. I know just about everybody here.
It's home.
Yeah, exactly. And it's home. And I can do business all over the state, and it didn't make sense to, if I'm buying a new one, I want to start fresh, might as well start and continue on working here in Livingston. I mean, especially being in Denham, like kind of the heart, I guess, of, the area.
Sure.
And that's, cause that's just where I felt like me. I mean, it's just, to me, this is where it had to be.
Yeah. It was never even a thought.
No, because regardless of if it would have been with TWFG or continued on, I would have stayed doing business here, in Denham. I mean, sure. every business that I've owned, between my car lot and my battery shop, being a real estate agent, been here in Denham. So,
yeah. Well, good deal. And you mentioned the flood, and your business flooded, obviously. If you ever want a definition of irony, let the insurance company flood. I mean, that's ironic. But with, you brought that up, and that brings me to this point, and that's with your business and where it's situated relevant to the Gulf of Mexico. Stephanie Berthelot and the crew at SR Enterprise can handle it all, from sheetrock to texture to paint. Give Stephanie a call at 504-432-9284. SR Enterprise, where they spread the paint and you spread the word. So obviously, and we'll take this season, for example, hurricane season. We've had more storms in Louisiana than I've seen in a long time, maybe ever, in one season, and extremely active overall. So active, in fact, that we entered the Greek alphabet on storms. Yeah. I don't know if that's ever happened.
Oh, not that I can recall, not in my lifetime. I mean, I'm sure it has. I've never paid attention more to storms now because of the business I'm in, because Absolutely. Every time a storm gets in the Gulf, I'm sweating it because everything has, because your customers are at risk at that point, because if something goes wrong, and like this past week, Monday and Tuesday, I was dealing with nothing but claims. So we've had some roof damage and things like that. Because like I said, I write all over the state at this point.
Yeah.
I have customers that are just closer to the coast, and we've been dealing with claims, and it's oddly enough, this is the worst one I've had to deal with so far.
It's been a bad season for storms, and I'm not in the insurance business. Right. Just stresses me out. Just every time, especially around here, right. Every time one's in the Gulf, it's like, okay, where's it going? And let's watch the water levels for sure. So,
exactly. You
have an insurance business. Obviously, every time those storms come through here, you definitely have to work harder. And it's not selling it where you're making your money. It's kind of giving away that money,
right,
to people that need it and that purchase their insurance from you. So, I wanted to ask you this: there's certain rules regarding storms and when you can write insurance, such as flood insurance and things of that nature. Explain to me the process when there's a storm in the Gulf with regard to insurance.
Okay. So whenever a storm enters the Gulf, it's usually up to each company's discretion when they cut that off, because more than likely, since I've been doing this for almost 11 years now, they will just restrict binding altogether. So, and it's mainly, unless there's a closing that's coming up, you really got to get that bound. So if you're going to close, like I had with this storm rolling in this last one, I had a lady that was going to be purchasing, doing her closing that Friday morning.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure we were bound before they cut it off, because a lot of times they'll cut it off. Usually as soon as it enters the Gulf, a lot of my home companies start, restricting our binding capabilities about the time it kind of rounds the tip of Florida, really and truly. And it starts with the lower parishes and things like that. And then, of course, as it gets closer, it's a sweeping whole statewide. Some companies will just do it statewide. Now with flood, if there is if there's a closing that's going to happen, and as long as you've got it in place the day of, even though the check, with a lot of time with flood insurance, that it's not technically a bind like it would be on a home where I walk it through, I hit the bind button, they get a binder. Flood is more of an application. They send it in. Once the check is there, then they bind it for the date that was requested. So as long as it was sent in and postmarked before that, they're good with it. And as long as it was for a closing, it'll be effective immediately. Now, you can't call me up 2 days before the storm's supposed to make landfall and ask for flood insurance, because on something like that, if you didn't have it or you weren't required to carry it, there's a 30-day waiting period.
And totally understandable. I mean, if you've got, and that was going to be kind of my follow-up question, was what if you're not buying a house? What if you just have a house, you're not in a flood zone, and you're watching, local news, and on that local news cast, you're looking at the weather, and all of the sudden they say there's a storm and it's running right up Denham Springs, and we're going to flood or something like that. And then you pick up the phone. Yeah, I need flood insurance.
Yeah.
So I totally understand why you would have to cut it off. I mean, people would just basically cancel their insurance every time there wasn't a storm in the Gulf,
right, and
reactivate it when there was. So there has to be some sort of responsibility there on the homeowner,
right,
that, if you're going to carry flood insurance, you're going to need to carry it all the time. Otherwise, if there's a storm in the Gulf, we can't write.
And a lot of times, and some of those other companies, especially, and most people don't know this on auto, a lot of our companies will cut off, like, you can get, your typical liability with collision.
Yeah.
But they won't cover comprehensive if it's in the Gulf.
Interesting.
So if you are trying to buy a new policy, or say you've had a car just sitting there, don't think you're going to go and get comp on it.
Yeah, and you'd probably be surprised. Well, you wouldn't be, but most listeners would probably be surprised how many people do that. So there's some notes for all you folks listening and watching, and that is, if there's a storm in the Gulf, you can't get comprehensive insurance. So probably a good idea to go ahead and get that, and that way you have it in case there's a storm in the Gulf. Same thing with flood insurance. If you have a house right now and it's not covered under flood, definitely, if you live in this area, get flood insurance.
And can I speak to something on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so and I know I get this question all the time, is like, why are we a zone X or preferred zone? Or why is that even considered a flood zone? Well, I mean, unless you live up on the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
Everything, especially down here in South Louisiana, everything is a flood zone. Everything has the potential to have flash flooding. So when people don't understand the difference between A, AE, I mean, there's so many different flood zones, but X is usually the one that we require, or we talk about being a preferred zone. So with X, it's the cheapest typically. Like right now, $250,000 on your structure and $100,000 on contents. Right now, it's like $516.
Yeah.
So for that peace of mind, and think about all the people that, especially in Livingston Parish, like a newer neighborhood is going to be a zone X, because that builder, that developer is taking that time to go Loma out everything to get it out of a flood zone to sell those properties, because you don't want to sell an entire neighborhood full of AE properties where people are paying, $1,200-$1,300 a year in flood insurance.
No doubt, it's gonna be real hard to sell those.
So a lot of personal friends of mine that flooded were in newer neighborhoods that were zone X, and they ended up having to take out the government assistance loan to pay for their repairs, because they didn't have that zone X. And what I've tried to preach to people is, and this is nationwide. 33% of all flood claims come from Zone X properties. So even still, you're in the least, you're in the preferred zone, the least amount to, the one that's supposed to not flood, or the least amount of flooding. 33% of all flood claims still come from that Zone X.
Yeah, so take note, listeners, of what he just said. 33%, grasp that. So 33% of people that make those flood claims are not even in flood zones. That's almost half. So pretty much everybody needs to have flood insurance on your house. To me, it's no different than termite insurance, in that you may go your whole lifetime without having to use your termite insurance. Hopefully you do. But you purchase it every year in the event that you get termites. You likely won't, but you purchase it just in case. That was a tough word to get out, Jim. So you buy that. How about buy? Yes. You buy that just in case. So the same thing with flood insurance, except for that percentage is much higher than people that get termites in their house.
Absolutely.
So, and on that subject, one thing I saw bite a lot of people, especially in Livingston Parish, after 2016 was they were older folks. They had paid off their homes, so they had no mortgage, and they canceled their required flood insurance if their mortgage would have them. You know, they require that you carry flood insurance. Well, even if they were in a flood zone, as soon as that opportunity came, they paid their mortgage off and they canceled it. I am someone who, fortunately, I had a mortgage, but I was getting close to the end of it. And I had said about 1 million times before that, I cannot wait until I pay off my mortgage so I can cancel my flood insurance. It was higher than, I don't know what zone I'm in, but it was not a zone X. So it was pretty high. And in addition to that, I had never flooded, lived there 20 years, never flooded. Matter of fact, since even in the 83 flood, my house did not flood. My neighborhood did not flood in 83. Okay. So I'm like, there is no way it's ever going to flood. I don't even know why I'm in this AE or whatever it was. I'm just saying the name, but right. I don't know why I'm in this zone. It didn't even flood in 83. And, I ended up with 6 feet in my house. So, right. So from a perspective of, thank goodness, number one, that I was not so diligent in paying my house completely off. And because I would have canceled a bit, I saw a lot of people, William, that they did that and they were in a bind. Right. Because now you've got a destroyed house with no contents insurance, no flood insurance, and basically you're older. Right. In a lot of cases. So you've got to come out of your retirement or whatever you have in savings, if you had anything, and you've got to rebuild a house from scratch.
Yeah. And another thing with that is most people didn't realize, because I had right after this a lot of customers that would, they were wanting, or they would sell their house or starting to sell their house, and they would cancel their flood policy that had been in place for forever. And what some people didn't realize is whenever you cancel that policy, that it's still, that's a rate that's been there since the inception of that policy. A lot of times those rates are grandfathered in. So if you were in a non-preferred zone like an AE, you cancel your policy, you try to sell your house. Well, I was getting it for $1,200 a year. This other person tries to go get a flood policy, and it may be triple that, because they were still on an old rate. And once and depending on the age of the house too, because if you kind of fall into these houses that are pre-firm, so pre-firm is 70, I think it's 73 if I'm not mistaken, 73 and older, that's a pre-firm rate. So anything like late 70s up into the 80s, when they were kind of still building houses without, a lot of those are going to be sitting below base flood elevation. And if you were on an original, basically a plan back then when you bought your house or built your house in the 80s, and you go to sell it now, that whatever policy you were paying for is not going to be the same rate that other person would get. Right. And that I had to explain that to many a customer, because they were like, well, why was I paying $900, $1,100 a year, and now this person's getting quotes for $3,000?
Yeah, they kind of locked in,
right? Yeah, and that's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things that you got to, don't cancel your policy because you're selling your house. In the event of, it doesn't make any sense. So why? And that was one of the biggest things, is why would you cancel your policy to begin with?
Right.
So it hadn't sold yet.
Until you hand over those keys, you could be in a bind. And I think a lot of people, fortunately, right now, I think anybody that was here in 2016 would rather, cut off their left foot than cancel their flood insurance at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
William Waldrep of TWFG Insurance in Denham Springs can service all of your insurance needs. Offering auto, life, health, and commercial insurance, William Waldrep of TWFG Insurance is a proud supporter of Local Leaders, the podcast. a lot of people a hard lesson. And look, I was one that even though I had flood insurance, I did not have contents insurance because I mean, I'm not going to flood, I didn't flood in 83. So I didn't have contents insurance, but you better believe the second I had the opportunity to buy contents insurance after that flood, I did. And so people learned a hard lesson, and hopefully that's gotten a lot better. Now, TWFG, they offer several different types of insurances. It's not just car insurance with TWFG. Kind of just give me a quick list of what type of policies you write.
Okay. And it's really going to be just about everything. With TWFG, we write kind of the gamut of everything. I mean, so yeah, we do write auto, so personal lines auto, we do write commercial lines auto as well. Homeowners, and we have several, I think we have 15 homeowner companies right now that we write for just in Louisiana that I write for. There's more out there. On top of that, we write personal umbrella, RVs, boats. Anything that you can think of. Yeah. So general liability, that's a big one here. So for a lot of contractors, we write the general liability, and just about any business needs liability insurance to begin with. Yeah. We have a product called, we do have workers' comp, and I've got several good workers' comp products. A lot of them are now, I have some, depending on your classification, of course, I have some pay as you go. So if you're in one of these, especially a retail environment or a restaurant environment where you have, some turnover, a lot more than most normal, the ability with pay as you go is as you make your payroll. So if you're doing a biweekly payroll, you basically report your wages that you've paid to your employees, and then your workers' comp is then billed then. So you can bill it every time you make your payroll. So if you're biweekly, once a month, or if you're weekly, I have a restaurant that pays weekly to his employees, and they pay their payroll and their work comp, on that pay as you go program. So
there's a lot of workers' comp is based off of the number of employees.
It's based off of employee count and payroll. Payroll is the biggest part of it. That's the biggest driving factor is payroll and the classification that they happen to sit in. So and not all classifications are the same. So some of them may pay 29 cents per hundred. Some are some of those contractor classifications get up to like $1,400 per hundred. So they get really expensive. So if you're cutting trees for a living, it's super expensive.
Oh yeah. Painting. Painting
is one of the ones riskier. One of the harder ones to write too, and it's I don't know why.
They're on ladders all the time,
right?
I would imagine off the ground, kind of like
roofers.
Tree guys.
Roofers. Actually, electricians and plumbers are pretty easy. I can write those all day long. AC guys, those are pretty easy. But it's anybody that's normally that has to leave the ground for any reason, and that's roofers, guys working trees, scaffold workers. So painters doing anything above three stories. Yeah, those are.
There's a higher risk involved in that, and I do want to make a point of this because I think it's an important point, not a major point, but an important one, and that is the ability to deal with someone and. Okay, so workers' comp especially, and general liability especially, those are things that are required for a lot of contractors to do work for not only builders, but state jobs, things like that. You've got to have those licenses showing that you're insured. And the issue that I have seen a lot lately, and I'm sure you have too, is people will go to this online, they'll go online and I just want kind of the cheapest liability insurance I can have because nothing's going to happen. So they go online, they get a certificate online through one of these websites and it ain't valid. And I've seen this happen many times. I just want to stress this point. It's very important. And a very good service you offer here locally with regard to that, because you can actually walk in the office, talk to William, and he deals with legitimate companies that are gonna basically insure you through him. And that's a very important point I want to make, because I get a lot of folks that don't know where to go for those types of insurances. And the last thing you want to do is resort to an online company that you've never heard of. And yeah, they may quote you, I don't throw a number out there, $10, a month, but that $10 a month is actually nothing because it's not valid. And that does happen in this.
Well, it's open to a lot of, especially now with the internet these days. I mean, you can, the forms for those certificates, you can go online and find them. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, to go get those forms and manipulate those forms. And that's what some of these companies, I mean, so yeah, you got to be, there's a few reputable companies that are online type only. And actually we represent Thimble, which is one of those you pay per project type deal.
Yeah.
But we sign you up and we take care of it. Like we sign you up with Thimble, you go through us. So if you ever have an issue, you do have like a live body you can call. And that's a lot of the issue with, I mean, some people like the convenience of online. And I know most shopping these days is done online or starts online. But the problem with when you buy your insurance online is like, if you buy your GL for your small business online, who's your representative? You have to call a 1-800 number to talk to somebody that's going to help you. Now,
to talk to a computer.
You got to go through computer prompts and things like that. And with me, if you buy like from an independent agent, at least you get that peace of mind that if I have an issue, I can at least call this guy, and and things can get done and get fixed if need be. I mean, and
that's right. You're
I'm not
be held accountable.
Right.
And look, that is the biggest point probably of the whole thing for me is if there's a storm, okay, and let's say it is a legitimate company, but they're online. They don't have representatives right here in Livingston Parish. If there's a storm and there's a, like they just had in Lake Charles, right. Imagine how busy that company, that only online company is, dealing with claims. They'll take their phone off the hook. You likely you will not be able to talk to someone for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Right.
When you're dealing with someone who is in the trenches in your town, like a William, what you're going to get is you're going to be able to drive up to his office and say, hey, man, I know your phone's, unavailable at the moment, but my roof's off my house or whatever, pick a disaster.
Right.
But in that situation, that to me means everything because I'm already stressed. I've already got something that has destroyed my house or caused an issue, whatever it is. I can go to William and actually, meet him at his office and we can discuss it. A car accident, anything like that. You've got a body there, right. A human being that you can deal with instead of a computer. That is worth millions of dollars in peace of mind to me personally. Another thing I do want to mention on that point is also you're keeping your money kind of, if I'm going to spend money on insurance, I want to give it to TWFG William Waldrep. Right. Because William Waldrop's going to take that money and he's going to spend it in Livingston Parish. Right. And so, it's my hope with this podcast, really, that everybody kind of clicks with everybody that we need to all support each other. And that's another reason that, it's not even going out of your way. I mean, you're right there. You're right there. What's a good description? Right there in the antique village. Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. Across from I'm in the antique district and I'm across from the Arts Council building.
Yeah. So that's a good landmark to use. And so you're right there in the heart of town. And so that's a big deal. So keep your money local for sure. And TWFG, this guy right here is obviously an insurance genius. So, yeah, some stuff.
I've been in there for a while and I still learn things every day. I mean, it's just one of those things and that's the beauty of like, I'm not too, I can humble myself sometimes, I guess, or I will call if I don't have that answer for that question, I can call an underwriter or I can call my company directly. Cause a lot of times, if you called a company, like say, if you had an issue and you wanted to call Progressive, you got an 800 number, you have to get somebody on the phone. I have a separate agency line. I usually can get somebody on the phone pretty quickly and get them to answer a question. And I get that all the time, especially with customers, especially my larger customers. Yeah. When we get to the like auditing and things like that, especially on work comp, because work comp auditing and a lot of general liability auditing is a big thing. So, I mean, I try to stay on top of those. When those audits are happening, I try to stay on that for my customer to make sure they're getting taken care of. Because, a lot of times, like I've had like one of my larger customers, they've had, because of this downturn, their payroll's been down. So, and their previous audit, I mean, they were owed some money back. Now, when an insurance company wants money from you, they want it right now. But when they got to give it back, they're not overly excited about giving it back to you.
Indeed.
But it is what it is owed back to them. And so, yeah, I mean, we stay on top of stuff like that. So, I mean, and I know that was just kind of a touch on the four main products that we sell on some of that other stuff. So anything personal lines, like I said earlier, home, auto, boat, side by side, and ATV, anything like that.
Four-wheelers.
But once you get into the commercial realm, there's so many different products that, I mean, I have, and it's from everything from hole-in-one insurance. So whenever you've got a golf tournament going on, I have a company that will write, say you're promising a BMW if you get a hole-in-one on this par 3. I've got a company that will insure that in the event of, you're probably not going to be able to afford that BMW with your tournament.
Yeah. So somebody actually won.
So yeah, they do have a product for that, and it's usually fairly cheap. I mean, but all up to, the big oil and gas type, situations where that's the biggest industry we have here in Louisiana. That would be the biggest clientele type customer that I would run into. But yeah, we have everything in between. So your mom and pop, retail environment where you get, so you're renting the building, but you own all the stuff inside of it. So if it's a clothing boutique, I have a product called a BOP, which is it's a business owner's policy, basically. Yeah. So the BOP would cover all of your content. So if you have a bunch of clothing in there, it covers that. It covers liability. It covers, and it's a long list. It's a laundry list, but everything in between there, there's so many. Once you get into that commercial realm, there's so many different products that. The biggest one now that is on the rise is cyber liability. So when you're running an online like boutique types, or anything online, really and truly, if you're collecting people's data, whether it be just their home, like their address, their name, numbers, and if you're collecting data like that, people can breach that and get that data, and then of course you could be held liable for it. And so the cyber liability has turned into a $1 billion a year. It was hardly anything, a few years ago, because now the reasoning behind it is when I think it was the biggest one I got. Was it Target that kind of set off this whole, when Target got breached, that kind of set the cyber liability world practically on fire. I mean, it was available then, but now it's like, if you run an online business of any sort, if you don't have it, you need to.
Yeah, because they will, I won't name the hospital's name, but there was a letter I received recently from a hospital, and they had said, hey, we got hacked.
Right.
And essentially this hacker, he communicated with them, and he said, guess what? I've got all the information and all the medical records. I don't know if it was medical. It may have just been names, addresses, and credit card numbers. I don't know. But basically, I've got all this information for your patients.
Yeah.
And I don't really want it. I want money instead. So what I'm going to do is I have he put something on the computers where they could not access records anymore. He had encrypted all their data.
Right.
And he said, you're going to have to pay me whatever it was. They didn't tell me that. And if you pay me that, I'll go ahead and unlock it.
Yeah.
And I promise you, I won't sell any of the information. You're just going to have to take my word for it.
Right.
And guess what? This hospital paid it.
Oh, yeah. And they got
in
to.
a heartbeat. Yeah. Because they could not get their information. So I would imagine that insurance would be something that they may have had that. And had they had that insurance company is actually who would pay that claim.
In the event that claim would happen, there's certain different things that they do pay, and it's mainly to protect them from getting sued. A lot of times from the individuals that they had their identities and stolen.
Absolutely.
But they have to have like safeguards in place to show the insurance company that, look, we are. I mean, and that's kind of where you've seen the large growth of these cybersecurity companies. Strix is probably one of them, I guess, is the best one to name. But stuff like that, that's why I've seen an uptick in those because of this. I mean, this is just one other way. I mean, crime, they're going to figure out how to steal something one way or another.
Sure.
So, but
no doubt. And that's an interesting thing that y'all offer. And pretty much, if I'll just say this, if you can insure it, chances are TWFG can get you insurance for it. So regardless of what it is, it's probably a laundry list of things and products. There's probably nothing that you don't insure pretty much.
No, and we can insure, I mean, everything up to like equipment. So like we have if you had like, say you're a contractor that has a bunch of like backhoes or, skid steers or stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about. So we can put those on an inland marine policy. That inland marine policy covers the equipment itself. So if you're a lawyer and there's professional liability. So, or in the case of me or say a real estate agent, we carry errors and omissions. So if we screw something up writing a contract or something, along those lines, it covers us under that. But yeah, there's just like, if I had to sit there and name every in the small, I mean, it takes another hour to get through.
Yeah,
all that.
oh yeah, and look, that brings me on my next point. There's 100 other things. I'd love to have you come back sometime, absolutely. And because there's 100 other things I want to talk about, but your subject requires several episodes, and so I'd love to have you come back maybe next month or something, and we discuss some other things I want to get into. We've already been talking, believe it or not, over an hour. But I got some fun facts that I want to discuss. These are really interesting. And so I do these with all my podcast guests. And I'm sure McHugh's over there and his ears are ringing right now because he loves fun fact time. So we're going to talk about, of course, insurance fun facts. And the first I'd like to make everybody aware of, you're probably already aware of this, but the first auto policy was actually sold in 1897.
Okay.
Who do you think the insurance company was?
Whew. I'll be honest with you, I don't know this one, but if it's going to be one of the older ones, it's got to be maybe Lloyd's of London or something like that, one of the older, and it's got to be one of the European countries. I mean, I don't know. Travelers. Okay.
Travelers, which, so you're right, one of the older ones.
I didn't realize that. God, that's old.
That's going back.
First auto policy.
Yeah, the first one, 1897.
Did it say what car it was?
It did not, but I bet I could find that.
Was it a Daimler Chrysler maybe? It was Benz no, Daimler, was that the only one? Whoever Mercedes-Benz morphed into?
Yeah.
Maybe that was the only, because I can't imagine.
That's an interesting.
Wonder who was building cars back then? Besides Mercedes.
No idea. That's what I wondered, because the Ford T model didn't come out till like 1912 or something like that. Maybe
it's got to be the Daimler Benz or whatever. Yeah.
Dane Arnold with Itradexchange has been enabling small business in the Livingston Parish area to save cash through his network of over 300 participating Livingston Parish businesses. Saving cash by trading services with other exchange members is what Itradexchange is all about. For more information, contact Dane Arnold at 225-205-3640 or visit itradexchange.biz. First state to require auto insurance, Massachusetts, really? 1927. To require. So they offered it obviously before that, but in 1927, Massachusetts was the first to require it. I bet that was a fight because that's, back then that was like you're taking my right. You can't make me have insurance.
Right.
Yeah. So, but they required it. Must have had a lot of wrecks. Michigan.
Hard to imagine in 1927 when cars barely got past the speed of smell. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What do you think the highest rate for auto insurance in the country state-wise is?
State-wise?
Yeah.
Believe, because we're not the worst, I think it's Michigan at the moment.
What would you say, Q? No idea. He has no idea. You're correct. Michigan is the highest rate for auto in the country. I would have thought Louisiana, but $2,239 on average a year for auto insurance. So do that math. Who do you think that? Yeah, exactly. You would think it'd be cheap because Detroit's right there. Who do you think the cheapest insurance?
Ooh, cheapest? Oh.
It'll be obvious after I say it. You'll be like, of course.
Oh, it's probably got to be one of the northern states. either one of the Dakotas and maybe Minnesota. I know Minnesota is real cheap. But yeah, go ahead and give it to me. I don't.
What do you think, Hugh? If you had to guess,
Rhode Island.
you're close. Vermont. They drive slow in Vermont, apparently.
All those tree huggers are on their bikes.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, so $932 annually
oh, that's
for
not bad.
insurance on average.
God, that's cheap. Could you imagine if it was $932
I
here?
love it. That's going to be for next podcast. We're going to talk about insurance rates.
I was thinking a small state, low 18-wheeler traffic. Short distance.
Yeah. It didn't surprise when I heard Vermont. I was like, of course. But okay, so here's a good one. The average cost to insure a Lamborghini, on average, $6,034 a year, and that sounded cheap to me.
That does sound cheap.
Yeah. What level of liability is that?
That must be the the bottom of the
Well,
barrel.
there's only a handful of companies that insure those.
Yeah.
To begin, there's a
Seemed cheap to me. Now that's Google telling me that, so that could be inaccurate, but that's what Google says. $6,000 annually. No, I don't think so. Yeah. What they're not telling you is that's a 70-year-old guy with no wrecks and retired. You know, most stolen vehicle. What do you say?
This list has changed. It used to be either the Honda Civic, Acura, Integra. I think F-150 is up there.
Pick one.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to go with the F-150 right now.
What would you say?
Well, no. Let me change my answer. I think I want to go Honda Civic. No, I
I
don't.
was going to say Honda Accord.
Maybe a Honda. Yeah.
So you're saying Accord.
It's got to be the Honda Civic or Accord. I mean,
You are right. The Honda Civic.
Okay.
Now, that blew my mind because I ain't stealing a Honda Civic.
No, it's
You
just
park something out there, it better be a Lamborghini. I might try to pop the lock on that one.
well, if you've ever been in a Honda Civic, it doesn't look like it's overly hard to steal to begin
Yeah,
with.
that might be the reason it's the most stolen. It's kind of
The
easy.
popularity of the Honda Civic has been the biggest driving factor. So I've noticed. Yeah, I mean, I had that. That was one of those things when we had looked at statistics. It was like Honda Accord, Honda Civic, Acura Integra when they were making that, which is I think died off back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
F-150 was up there because mainly there's F-150s everywhere.
Right.
And there's a few other cars. I think Corvette is probably on that top 10 list.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Hondas are. It's because there's so many.
Yeah, there's a ton.
And
they go forever.
And the
They're
car,
always
the
going
car
on.
culture in California is probably what drove a lot of those statistics too, because every kid had a Honda Civic, and they were fixing it up.
Cheap
so
to insure.
yeah, so and that has a lot to do with it. I'd have to assume. I mean, just
Agree.
spitballing.
Agree. What natural disaster produced more auto claims in history? The most auto claims in history.
Oh, it's got to be a hurricane. But which one?
Yeah. Natural disaster.
Natural disaster.
So you're going with hurricane. So which hurricane?
It's got to be either Sandy or Katrina.
You said.
Because Sandy hit New York. That's why.
Yeah, Sandy's a good one. Don't forget Harvey.
Oh, Harvey was nasty.
Harvey was bad for Houston. A lot of people live in a small mountain area. He said Sandy, so I'll go with Harvey.
You're correct, Q.
Nice.
Hurricane Harvey at 198,020 vehicles destroyed.
Wow. That's a lot.
Wrap your mind around that. Basically, you might as well say 200,000
200,000
vehicles.
cars.
Now, when I first read that stat before I clicked the answer, I was thinking the flood we had would have been up there but
Oh, no.
it wasn't nowhere near that.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
200,000.
But I know.
Well, think about how big Houston, or I guess the Houston area is in general, because Houston's a huge spread out. I mean, it takes 14 forevers to get across Houston. And Harvey was
How many
bad.
car lots do they have with brand new vehicles?
Right.
Beautiful brand new vehicles, never been touched.
Right.
And all of those got swallowed up.
Yeah.
Plus, that. But I just cannot wrap my brain around 200,000 vehicles. One natural disaster just wiped away.
Yes.
Wow, man.
Houston's up to 16 million people, 52 inches of rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Again, I got to have you on again
Absolutely.
soon. We got so much more to talk about, but William, you're right there right there across from the Arts Council building, right there in the, beautiful part of Denham Springs, which is the Antique District, right past the sign, really, as you pass that on the right-hand side. So, that's where they can find you in Denham Springs. What's the address?
It's 132 Hummel Street.
Hummel Street, and you have a website?
Yeah, it's TWFG Gulf Coast. So
Awesome.
If you put that in, it's TWFG Gulf Coast. On Facebook, I don't think we've changed the Facebook. I think if you just search TWFG and my name, William Waldrep, you'll find me. I think I need to go in there and change that. But yeah, TWFG Gulf Coast, you can go in there and actually it'll have a link to, if you need to contact me, if you wanted a quick quote or something like that.
Yeah,
that should all be there. So
absolutely, and I'm going to link both of those websites below in the comment section of this video, and I'll also link his address in there. So you'll have all kinds of ways to get in touch with William. Call him if you want any insurance quotes, and let him see what he can find for you out there. As we discussed earlier in the podcast, that's one of the advantages of dealing with William at TWFG. Is the fact that he can just take your information and basically shop those quotes. He's not locked into one particular insurer that he has to go through. So he's going to find you the best possible rate he can find you. I did bring you a gift for appearing today.
Awesome.
So this is the softest shirt you'll ever wear.
All right.
That's a Local Leaders
Thank you, sir.
podcast branded t-shirt.
Okay.
And you can cut your grass in that and you won't even sweat, William. That's how awesome that is. So I do want to thank McHugh David for engineering this podcast. My guest for today, William Waldrep of TWFG Insurance, the Livingston Parish News for the space, and all you viewers and listeners for your support. Please follow me on all my social media and spread the word. Share these podcasts. It helps my guests to get their name out there. And we're promoting local business, which is what we all want. Follow me on all my social media as I asked. And I would like to thank all my sponsors for this show as well. I could not do it without all of you supporting me. If you're interested in sponsoring Local Leaders Podcast, or appearing on the show, please reach out to me by emailing jim@paintpodcast.com. Until next time, I am Jim Chapman, reminding you to love your community, support local business, and keep leading. Boom. Sporting Center in Denham Springs is your one-stop shop for team sports equipment, school uniforms, and promotional goods. Conveniently located next to the Antique Village since 1977. Sporting Center, your business means everything to them because your name rides on everything they do.